The morning fog hadn't lifted from the Warner Brothers lot when the first assistant director checked his watch for the third time. 7:58. In 2 minutes, Clint Eastwood would arrive, and in 2 minutes, every department head, every crew member, every actor would need to be in position. This wasn't a suggestion. This was how Eastwood Productions operated, and those who understood this simple fact thrived. Those who didn't learned quickly, or they found themselves on different productions. Industry veterans who worked across multiple Eastwood sets often described the same phenomenon. There was a particular quality to the silence that preceded his arrival, a collective holding of breath that spoke to decades of earned respect. This wasn't fear. It was something more profound, an understanding that when Eastwood stepped onto a set, time itself seemed to reorganize around his presence. Crew members who had worked with him since the Dirty Harry days spoke of this with something approaching reverence. He never raised his voice, never threw tantrums, never indulged in the theatrical displays of authority that plagued so many Hollywood sets. He simply expected professionalism, and through some alchemy of presence and reputation, he received it. The stories about Eastwood's approach to filmmaking had become Hollywood lore by the time he directed Unforgiven in 1992. Those familiar with his methods knew that he often completed films ahead of schedule and under budget, not through shortcuts or compromises, but through a philosophy that treated everyone's time as valuable. A gaffer who worked on several Eastwood films in the 1990s recalled how the director would arrive before sunrise, review the day's work with his cinematographer, and have the first shot ready before the official call time. No wasted motion, no unnecessary takes, no indulgence of artistic temperament at the expense of the 100-plus professionals waiting to do their jobs. This efficiency wasn't coldness. Crew members consistently described Eastwood as approachable, even warm, but with an unmistakable boundary around the work itself. During the filming of $1 Million Baby, according to those present on set, he demonstrated this balance perfectly. Between takes, he might share a quiet joke with the boom operator or ask after a grip's family. But when he called action, a transformation occurred. The casual conversation ceased, replaced by an intensity of focus that seemed to pull everyone into its gravity. It was during the production of Gran Torino that an incident occurred which would later circulate through Hollywood as a perfect distillation of the Eastwood method. According to multiple crew members who witnessed the events, a younger actor, relatively new to feature films, but with considerable success in television, had developed a pattern of behavior that was beginning to affect the production. The actor would arrive at his call time, technically not late, but without the preparation that allowed for immediate work. While makeup and wardrobe scrambled to ready him, expensive minutes ticked by. The first time this happened, nothing was said. Eastwood simply waited, hands in his pockets, watching the crew reset for the delay. Those who had worked with Eastwood before recognized the warning signs. His patience was legendary, but it had limits, and those limits were invariably tied to respect for the collective effort of filmmaking. A script supervisor who had worked on multiple Eastwood films noted that he seemed to calculate the cost of delays not in dollars, but in the accumulated time of every person waiting. A 5-minute delay wasn't 5 minutes. It was 5 minutes multiplied by 150 people. The second incident came 3 days later. This time the actor had been on set, but engaged in a lengthy phone conversation that extended through the call for places. According to witnesses, Eastwood said nothing, simply gestured for the first assistant director to proceed with preparation. When the actor finally ended his call and moved into position, he found the entire crew ready, waiting in that particular Eastwood silence that felt heavier than any shouting could have been. Still, the pattern continued. The young actor, perhaps emboldened by the lack of confrontation, began to treat the production schedule as a loose framework rather than a commitment. He would question blocking that had been established in rehearsals, requiring additional time to reset. He would request multiple takes for scenes Eastwood had deemed complete, citing a desire for perfection that crew members quietly noted seemed more about screen time than artistic integrity. According to those present, Eastwood accommodated these requests without complaint, but something in his demeanor shifted. The easy warmth that usually characterized his interactions began to cool, replaced by a professional distance that veteran crew members found more unsettling than any display of anger would have been. The culmination came during a crucial scene near the end of production. The sequence required coordination between multiple departments, special effects, stunt coordination, and precise timing with background performers. It was, according to the production schedule, a scene that needed to be completed in a single day to maintain both budget and momentum. The young actor arrived technically on time, but immediately began discussing changes to his character's motivation in the scene, changes that would require significant adjustments to blocking and camera positions. According to multiple witnesses, Eastwood listened to the actor's concerns with his characteristic stillness. When the actor finished speaking, Eastwood nodded once, then turned to his first assistant director. What he said next would become part of Hollywood lore, not for its drama, but for its decisive simplicity. He reportedly said 5 words: "We'll shoot it as scheduled." Then he walked to his position behind the camera and waited. The actor, perhaps finally understanding the magnitude of his miscalculation, moved to his mark. The scene proceeded exactly as rehearsed, and according to those present, Eastwood called it in 2 takes. When the actor approached afterward, apparently hoping to discuss his concerns, Eastwood had already moved on to the next setup. The conversation never happened. What occurred next demonstrated the quiet ruthlessness that had allowed Eastwood to survive and thrive in Hollywood for over 60 years. The actor completed his remaining scenes professionally, even enthusiastically, but something fundamental had shifted. In the editing room, choices were made. The film's focus subtly shifted away from what might have been a co-starring role to something more supporting. Lines that might have been kept were trimmed for pacing. Scenes that showcased the character were reframed to emphasize the ensemble. The actor's representation, according to industry sources, would later describe it as a masterclass in how a director could reshape a performance without reshooting a single frame. When Gran Torino was released, critics praised its tight pacing and focused storytelling. The young actor's performance was noted as competent but unremarkable, a footnote in reviews that centered on Eastwood's commanding presence and the film's thematic weight. Those who had been on set understood what they were seeing, not vengeance, but consequence. Eastwood hadn't punished the actor. He had simply allowed the actor's choices to define his place in the final product. The impact extended beyond that single film. Word traveled, as word always does in Hollywood. Casting directors began to ask subtle questions about professionalism when the actor's name came up. Producers wondered aloud whether he could handle the pressure of carrying a production. The actor continued to work, but the trajectory that had seemed so promising flattened. According to those familiar with his career, he spent years rebuilding his reputation, taking smaller roles, arriving early, staying late, demonstrating the professionalism he had failed to show when it mattered most. Years later, a veteran producer who had worked with Eastwood on multiple films reflected on what made him unique among Hollywood directors. It wasn't his iconic status or his box office success. It was his understanding that filmmaking was fundamentally a collaborative art that demanded respect for every participant. From the biggest star to the newest production assistant, everyone's time mattered. Everyone's contribution had value. And anyone who failed to recognize this truth would find themselves learning it through experience. This philosophy extended beyond mere scheduling. Eastwood Productions became known for its atmosphere of calm efficiency. Department heads spoke of being trusted to do their jobs without micromanagement. Actors described an environment where creativity could flourish within clearly defined parameters. Even studio executives, typically the source of tension on film sets, found themselves deferring to Eastwood's judgment, understanding that his track record of delivering quality films on time and under budget had earned him an autonomy rare in modern Hollywood. The lesson that emerged from stories like the Gran Torino incident wasn't about power or ego. It was about the fundamental contract that exists in any collaborative endeavor. When one person prioritizes their individual concerns over the collective effort, they break that contract. And in breaking it, they forfeit their claim to the benefits that come from being part of something larger than themselves. Eastwood never needed to explain this. He simply demonstrated it through actions that spoke louder than any lecture could have. Those who thrived under Eastwood's direction understood this implicitly. They arrived prepared, respected the schedule, trusted their colleagues, and found themselves part of productions that ran like precision instruments. They discovered that efficiency didn't mean rushing, that discipline didn't preclude creativity, and that respect for the process elevated everyone involved. These lessons extended far beyond Hollywood, applicable to any field where groups of people come together to create something meaningful. The story of Clint Eastwood's approach to filmmaking serves as a reminder that true authority doesn't announce itself with noise and fury. It manifests in the quiet expectation of excellence, the patient accumulation of respect, and the understanding that time is the most valuable resource any of us possesses. In an industry often characterized by waste, excess, and ego, Eastwood's method stands as proof that there is another way. Not easier, perhaps, but ultimately more rewarding for everyone involved. When film students and young directors study Eastwood's work, they often focus on his visual style or his thematic concerns. But those who worked with him know that the real lesson lies in those moments of silence on set, when everyone understood their role and executed it with precision. That silence wasn't empty. It was full of purpose, respect, and the shared understanding that they were part of something being done right. In Hollywood, where chaos often reigns, such moments are rarer than they should be. Under Clint Eastwood's direction, they were simply the standard by which everything else was measured.